Good. Thank you, Bailey. Say hi, Bailey.
Hi, Bailey.
Bailey in her badass dino shirt.
That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family from the Southeast Missouri area and hopefully from all over the country, you are tuning in and streaming live with us on Facebook to Shakers. This is Shakers. It's Sessions at Shakers. I did this last week too.
Welcome
You're
to
so
Shakers
good at this
at
game.
Sessions.
Yeah, there we go. This is Sessions, a live streaming show, talk show, streamed live from Shakers, downtown Cape. And we are thrilled to have you guys along board with us. Tonight is a jam-packed show of necessary conversation and important talk. I'm going to do a little beginning fun stuff conversation, then we're going to get right into it. You'll notice there is no musical guest tonight because the category and the episode is so important that we run our information straight through so we don't have any interruptions. So it's going to be a straight 2 hours. So set yourself down, get a drink. Hopefully you are having a drink like we are, and get your friends around and let's all talk about something that's very important, which is mental health. When I introduce the guest, you'll understand why one of our guests is here. And we, what was that?
That's my creepy notification sound from Facebook Messenger.
It was like hello. It was weird.
Hello?
But basically, if you've never watched this before, if you're just now finding Sessions, we do this every Thursday from 8 to 10 p.m. I'm your host, Eric Harper, and I kind of mediate the night, and I kind of guide the conversation, and then I bring in these super intelligent guests that make me look really good, except for Zach makes you look bad because he's so sexy. And then I got the sexiest guy in town, Cody, sitting to my left, the sexiest lawyer you've ever seen to my right, and then I'll introduce the other guest here in a second.
You have to stop lying to our guests.
I'm not going to, I'll never stop. Can't stop, won't stop.
I like how instead of saying I'm not lying, he said I can't stop. I'm a habitual liar.
I can't. But it's going to be a great show tonight, and we're going to do a little different tonight. Last week we let the guests pick their own topics. We kind of had a whole segment on that. And tonight we're doing the same thing, but it's going to be a little different, where I'm going to kind of guide the conversation. Mental health is such a deep topic, and especially now that it's come to light, and that's one thing we could say about the media and things right now. It's actually starting to become necessary to talk about it, as opposed to optional, and we just put it off to crazy people and stuff. We're actually going to dive into the history of mental health. We're going to dive into the different subsections and categories of mental health, and we're going to talk about the mental health that affects us every day of our lives, and then can send some people, and that's why we brought our other guest in, could send some people into such a spiral to where they feel like that shooting up a school or a mall is their only option. Not to excuse their actions, but that's how they feel. If you've never been to the bottom of your depths of your soul, where your mind is broken and you're stuck, you don't know how it feels. So I also want to do this category because
different Zach.
I thought it was so important to share some of my personal experience with mental health issues, and I think everybody at the table has dealt with it on one way or another, whether personally or professionally, which is why Nick's here. So let me introduce our guests, as we always do, then we'll get into some lighthearted stuff before we get real serious. And what I want everyone to get out of this show tonight is we want the stigmata and people say stigma of mental health to be broken down, and the only way we can do it is to talk about it openly and to start finding out and seeing what makes people do the things they do, and where sometimes people don't feel like they have a choice but to do what they do, and we have to try to get people to understand that, because we don't want people to push away. We need to bring in now. That's how we solve problems. So my guest, going around, I always go from my left to the right, Zach Mazaid, and buddy here, Karaoke Extreme, Bartender Extreme, and now Talk Show Streaming Live Extreme, Cody Essick. Matt Lawler, our assistant prosecuting attorney who keeps us straight and headed towards Canada every episode. And tonight, for the first time on the Sessions, at the Sessions table, for this episode, I wanted to find a professional that works in the field, that understands what's going on, the DSM-4, and now they have a 5, right?
Yeah, DSM-5 revision.
Yeah, they've revised a lot because of the changes in mental health, and I think having someone that works in the field, that knows currently everything that's going on, is so important. So our very special guest tonight is sitting in the, I guess we could say the swiveling, rotating chair of guest, is Mr. Nick Irvin.
Hi there.
Nick, would you like to say, if you don't mind, if it's okay, can you tell everybody where you work, kind of what you do?
Sure. So as Eric said, my name's Nick Irvin. I'm a board-certified and licensed nurse practitioner. I specialize in palliative care. I am a family nurse practitioner. We always say it's womb to tomb. I work across the breadth of life.
Wait, say that again.
Womb to tomb.
Womb to tomb.
Yeah.
If you'd like that on a T-shirt, you'll be selling those.
$15 a pop.
There we go. It's a good price.
But no, we...
As your agent, I'm going to get you 20% of that.
Nice.
Wow.
But no, I deal with patients on a day-to-day basis, and a majority of those patients do have some sort of mental health disorder. So,
Thank you, Nick. Now, if you'll notice, everybody that's watching, we want everyone, and this is the key, if everybody that watches the show, say there's 20, 25, 30 people watching, if every one of you share and get other people to watch, before you know it, we'll have hundreds of people watching the show. And this show is very important, so if there's any of the session shows that you've ever wanted to watch, or maybe you kind of put off and you're like, oh, they're just talking, pay attention to this show. This is very important. I know it matters to a lot of people, but you'll notice the guests are going to be on their phones quite a bit tonight, and I wanted to let you know, because this show is a little different. They get on their phones because they get messages and they get live stream feeds from guests that are responding to things that we're saying. It's actually part of how we do the show. It's how we actually can kind of communicate with people. We can also find out what you want to hear about. None of us are perfect experts at anything, but we are a bunch of guys and girls that come in here, not girls tonight, but typically girls. I didn't want anybody to think I was calling anybody a girl. Unless you identify that way, and then it's quite all right.
Why are you pointing at me, man?
I don't know, because I figured you're going to jump in and go, well, actually,
If the boot fits.
yeah, if the boot fits. I love that, though. I'm going to get a bunch of slogans with bumper stickers. Matt Lawler says, and just, if you ever
Hey,
run for
I'm in
prosecuting
favor
attorney-
of this.
If you ever run
Make
for
sure you
prosecuting
get
attorney-
I will not be
Show
running
bumper
for
sticker,
prosecuting
that's what you
attorney.
You will not be running for that?
No, I work for one, and she's good. She's great at it, and the one in this county is also great at it. You never run against somebody that does a good job.
Okay, well, makes a good point. That's a good point. But you'll notice them checking their phones, so please understand that they're not just on there playing games or BS and
I just
Cody
put a level
is.
in Candy Crush.
Yeah, nice job. Level 757.
Yep.
Good job. But they will be checking their phones. So if you are watching the show and you'd like to have something talked about tonight, especially with the mental health issue, if there's something that you wonder about, we do have a professional here, and we do have a lot of guys. I know personally I've dealt with a lot of personal issues with mental health. This is going to be a very open soul show. We're going to open our hearts up and our soul, and we're going to kind of bear a little bit to you guys and let you know kind of what we've dealt with personally and then what we think is going on in the world. So lightheartedness time, real quick, before we get into the depth of it. There's a lot of cool movies coming out. And I always go on Variety.com to check out the movies. So if you guys go on Variety.com, they'll tell you about new movies coming out, new scripts getting approved. It's really cool to check all that out because you'll see a lot of stuff that's coming up, and Marvel's rebooting everything and getting its stuff going. Any of you here? Is there a movie you're really looking forward to that's coming out? Anything in particular?
It 2? Like It Chapter 2, come
Yeah,
on.
right. Well, they made Pennywise look kind of crazy now.
I'm okay with this.
He was crazy before,
Yeah.
but then they got his hair down now, and
And I do want to kind of touch back on something you just said
Oh,
about
yeah.
Marvel rebooting.
Yeah.
How about we talk about Marvel fucking shit up?
I know.
that wasn't Marvel's fault. Come on now.
That was Sony's
It was
fault.
Marvel and Sony. Marvel.
Well, no, tell because some people won't know what you're talking about.
They took Spider-Man away. I'm not okay with it.
So they took him away in
In the MCU, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Okay.
Now, Sony and Marvel going at it. As we know, Marvel is Disney conglomerate, some bullshit, but Disney wanted more money. Sony said no. Now it's in a head. Now this is
That's
the
one
article.
side of the story. That's
Of
one
course.
side of the story.
I like the thing that's like Disney's like, can we use X-Men? And Fox is like, no. And it's like, buys Fox. And it's
Right.
like, hey, can we use Spider-Man? So he says no. And Disney's like, you don't want me to go there again, do you?
Yeah, I'm just saying. If Disney buys Sony, don't mess up my PlayStation 5. It's my request.
The updated article did state that Sony's reasoning behind it was that because of Kevin Feige's new responsibilities with the Disney Plus shows, because those are not Marvel Television, those are the Marvel movie folks doing the TV shows on Disney Plus, because he was not available to work with Spider-Man and then also help them building their own Spider-Verse with the Venom movies and things like that. that was their reasoning for pulling out. Now, there is an article out there that's saying Disney wanted 50% share of their profits, which,
No.
let's be honest,
Not Disney.
Disney and Marvel are at least, we'll call it 60 to 75% responsible for the highest grossing Spider-Man movie of all time, and Sony has them to thank for that.
That's true.
I will say that, I mean, the new Spider-Man definitely can't touch Tobey Maguire. I'm a Tobey Maguire fanboy. Only one to get 3. Shout out to him. But
Jay's piping in now. Jay's like, oh yeah.
It's the first time he's talked this
Yeah,
entire
he's never
time.
talked.
that's all right.
Jay's talking.
Also, again with the great shirts.
What does it say? The Exorcist.
The
And it's-
Exorcist. He's wearing my girlfriend on the shirt.
when I first saw that, I thought it was Michael Myers for a second. I didn't see the Exorcist part.
You wound me, sir.
No, I know who it is now. I see it now. Jay always wears the best shirts. It's every time he's in, we see a different kind of shirt.
Joy Division last week.
I think what we need to do
Beetlejuice
is
the week before.
start putting up like little snippets of your shirt so everybody can enjoy
Yeah.
what we get to see every time. So what I like about this, and the reason I brought this up, is I've heard you, Nick, with Matt sitting around the bar, and you guys have actually had long conversations not only about sports but entertainment and just in general. And what I was kind of chuckling when you guys were talking is,
It's mostly Star Trek, and you never talk about that, and I'm really disappointed.
okay, we look. I don't want to talk about anything that I
Cards back.
haven't educated myself on. So eventually, we'll let you guys do a Star Trek topic just to make you happy.
That'll have to be 3 sessions.
I
of
want
2
it
Right,
hours.
a whole 3 episodes. But what I liked about it was to hear Nick talk, and then with Zach, it was interesting because just to listen to you guys, you find yourself thinking that these guys are paid professionals that are working in these companies, or that no, these are just average everyday guys that read and pay attention to the world, and that's why we do the show.
You should ask my wife. I'm very average.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, guys. He said it.
Oh, was that
Cheers.
close enough?
Cheers.
Yep.
Okay, so they're cheering. This is kind of the new drinking game, but I started by saying the reason I wanted to do this show, and then I started saying versions of that. So now they just want an excuse to take a drink.
Anytime it's close enough to that sentence, we're
You're
going
gonna
to
take a drink, All
And
right.
that's why
I don't need an excuse.
Maybe you at home, not to encourage overconsumption, but maybe you don't.
Yeah, be careful.
You
Let's
can
make
turn
this-
it into a game. We could, Now we were doing like a little code word. I was giving people a
again?
code word.
Yeah.
Hey, I think I'm going to give another code word. I'll do it here in just a second. But
That's pretty advantageous of
It was like at the end we did it last time.
I know.
It was just opening a little bit earlier, so people were still checking in.
But what's funny is nobody really thought about saying it until the end, and that's what's funny about a code word is you think somebody would have said it right away.
right.
But the code word was to get you some kind of gift or something. Nobody really responded. Nobody even answered it.
Right.
So we have people paying attention for a shorter period of time and they're missing it, or they're just not doing it. Either one. But we may do a code word tonight. Let's do a weird code word. Chrysanthemum.
Well, that's not getting said.
I know. It's gonna make it hard. Bailey, don't leave. Bailey, come back.
She saw a dog, and she's got to go outside. That's-
Bring that puppy over here. So anyway, if you don't know where we're at, if you're not from the area, if you happen to be watching from anywhere else, and I'd like to know that if you guys are actually watching right now, and any of the guests have you pulled up on the message board, tell us where
Turn
you're
you up,
from.
pull out
We'd
my
love
phone
we'd
and
love
see
to
this
acknowledge
message.
who you are, where you're from.
We want to know your
I have one from
aspirations.
Illinois and
Wow.
one from Kansas City right now.
There we go.
so-
We got an Illinois and a Kansas City. So shout out to Illinois and Kansas City. Illinois, you guys are your governor's doing some crazy crap over there. but-
I'm rocking.
Hey,
I'm
if-
sorry.
For my Southern Illinois listener,
sorry.
JB Pritzker called. He says he wants $10 a bucket for those crawfish y'all are picking up from Route 3 right now.
from Route 3. Well, anyway, we had one of our guests, Josie Rawls, was here, and Josie came in. She works at she works at SIU, and she lives over in Southern Illinois, and she was so knowledgeable, and she was she was a fan favorite. Actually, people asked for her to come back, and hopefully we'll get her back one of these times. But we hit on Illinois quite a bit over here in Missouri. It's kind of just a natural border state rivalry thing, but we don't have a problem with Illinois.
Well, it's because we're better than them. It's
Is that what it
I'm
is?
from there. I understand.
There's
At
somebody
least it's
Illinois.
not Kansas.
There's somebody Illinois right now.
Two people just said Catawissa.
Catawissa. What is that?
Catawissa.
That's up in Jeffco, right?
No, it's right outside.
Part of it is in
You
Jeffco.
know, hey,
yeah.
Rob's your guy, right?
Yeah, Rob is my guy. Carrie's my
What's
guy.
up, Rob? Hey,
And Sammy's my guy.
so now we talked briefly about Rob. Now Rob said he wants to come be on the show, right?
Rob does, yeah.
So Rob, I'm telling you while you're watching, I'd
I've got
love to
two
have you
Kansas
come in.
City.
I know you're a couple hours away.
It is a couple hours away.
So if you I'm sure you could probably
Wayne.
crash at Zach's pad.
Slumber party.
Or I have a full boat, but I'd love to have you in. Anybody that's watching the show that has things to say, we've had some great feedback from guests, and they've really said some things that really meant a lot for the show. So we'd love to have guests want to come on the show. You just kind of contact me and let me know. And Zach was having a conversation with somebody about it, and as it is, you just contact me and we'll have a brief conversation. And Nick got on because last week we wanted to do I've been wanting to do a mental health episode, and I knew I needed a professional, and luckily Nick happened
And
to
I'm
come
the
in.
closest thing they could get.
You'll do by default, right?
Yes.
But Nick actually works in the field, as he had expressed. So I think it's
Actually
time.
getting shout outs for people playing venues here.
Oh, yeah?
He says he's based lead vocalist out of Lomez, based out of Southern Illinois. Been trying to get a
Lomez.
hold of you guys to play at the venue.
Okay, so Lopez contacted us. I'm glad they're paying attention. That gives you points for me to book you. I actually do all the bookings. So Lopez, I did get your contact info, and I will be contacting you. So you know about that. Bands contact us all the time about playing here. So
Bailey.
they got references to play here. We have a really cool venue for that. So thanks for tuning in and listening. So let's get right into it, guys. We're not going to have a musical guest tonight. You know, Sessions has musical guests every week. Local artists that we bring in to play acoustically. I didn't do a guest this week because Zach actually brought me the idea. It's basically, this episode requires a full 2 hours, and so we want to get to it because I think there's a lot of stuff to unpack, and I think that that it's important that we
You're
get right
amazing.
to it. So basically, the way I did this week was each guest, and so you guys know, I'm just the host and the mediator. These guests actually make the show what it is. I give them ideas, but basically they bring their energy and their ideas and their knowledge to it, and the show works because of who we have come in. And we try to find a unique balance with them. But this week I gave them an assignment, and the assignment was mental health, and it was the history of mental health, and we wanted to kind of dive into it, and then also the current aspects of mental health today. And each guest has a certain subsection or category of mental health. It could be a specific affliction or disease, or it could be some kind of an issue. I think Nick's probably going to talk about the clinical and the application side of things, and we've got the other topics. But each guest is going to be talking about their specifics, because mental health is such a big category that you can't really know everything for a show like this, especially without being highly educated in it now. And I didn't want to have somebody in here. Nick is applicable. He does hands-on, day-to-day operations with mental health issues, and that's the kind of person I wanted to have. I don't mind talking to someone that's educated or is a learned professor or doctor in it, but sometimes we get caught up in the technical side of things and people lose interest. So I want to make sure we get to it. So speaking of that, I'm going to give you a little synopsis, a little history of mental health. I'm going to do it as quick as I can. Nick, would you like to give us a few categories of mental health subsections? We'll start with that, and then I'll do the little history here.
So we definitely want to get to the crux of the matter. We want to talk about. We want to define what mental health is. That it's super important. A lot of people think that mental health is just a specific disease process. They want to think that it's just somebody who feels down when they wake up in the morning or something like that. Mental health is a myriad of different disease processes, and that's what they are. They're disease processes, just like congestive heart failure, just like somebody who has a kidney stone. It is a disease process that actually keeps you from successfully performing mental functions and being productive with activities and fulfilling relationships and things like that. So it's important to know that mental health is a very all-encompassing thing. Some of these things that we need to talk about and we need to shake the stigma off of are things like depression, things like anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder. These are all subsets of mental health, and they all have to be treated as such, because if we put a big blanket over all of it at the same time, not only are we going to misdiagnose, but we're going to mistreat or not treat at all.
So something you said, the basically put a blanket over everything and try to solve everything. I think that's the main thing that I found out from the research I did, and I think we'll talk about it some more, but that's a good point. Is for years, and we're still doing it, mental health has been treated as a whole, and they try to categorize everything and kind of where you're treating people with schizophrenia next to people with depression. And my whole thing with that is as somebody that dealt with mental health issues my whole life, I felt uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable thing because we're always told, deal with it. Deal with your mental problems. Deal with your emotional. Because I think mental health is the one disease or the one affliction or problem that we have that connects all of our body.
But we at the same time know so little about.
We know so little about. It's mind, emotional, and physical all connected, and one thing can cause another thing, and that's what I think what Nick is talking about, and what we're going to get into is. If you are dealing with anything, and this is kind of a closing thing too, but I wanted to let everybody know, if you are dealing with something, or if you just don't feel right about something, sometimes we just get that off feeling. It's okay to be off. It's okay to not feel right. We get worn down and tired, but if it's an ongoing thing that you deal with that seems to give you certain symptoms that Nick and others will probably talk about today, you need to talk to somebody.
It's not a weakness to ask for help.
No, and that's what we're going to do. Is each person's going to talk, but I'm going to give a personal testimony, kind of about some things that I dealt with.
Good point. I mean, if you're willing to be open about it, does anybody here have any mental disorders that they'd like to share?
Most definitely.
Yeah. What do you have?
I suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder along with severe anxiety.
I suffer from ADHD,
Depression.
I've got manic depressive diagnosed and anxiety disorder.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I have the bout of anxiety, just like most people do. I've never been diagnosed with anything.
Well, that's the key right there. Is there's and you'll know this, but there's different levels of depression. There's different levels of anxiety. There's the day-to-day anxiety that everybody deals with. Then there's the specific acute anxiety that affects us physically, mentally, emotionally, and that's what we're wanting to talk about. You see it a lot of times, and I see it on Facebook and other social media. People use those sites as a cleansing. They kind of that's their therapy, and I've even joked about it, made fun of it. But here's the thing: the recent things that have happened in our country with the mass shootings, they've noticed it's about every one of them. There was some kind of social media presence with each one of those murderers, and their social media presence basically told the story of what they were going to do or who they were, and so I've kind of started looking at people's posts a little different. I might not put a lot of credence to each one, but I'm starting to really pay attention, and you got to read the nuances of what people say. So let's get into the short history of mental health, and then we're going to go around to each person, and we're going to talk about stuff. First of all, what's your category tonight? What are you going to be talking about tonight?
I'm actually going to be talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, with the emphasis on not the soldiers. There's a lot of, everybody knows PTSD by the soldier,
right?
But there's a lot of stuff that happens here on the home front that definitely gets.
That's a very good point, and we're not discounting soldiers. Because I'm a disabled vet myself, and so we're not taking away from that at all. But I like what you said about that, for the fact that it's
more relatable.
It is very relatable to everyday life, and there's not a lot of stuff that people that aren't in battle or in the military don't understand. They don't fully get it. What that kind of PTSD is. You're talking about the everyday life PTSD that often gets kind of pushed to the side and made fun of.
Yes.
So that's important. What about your category?
I'm doing the correlation between mental illness and substance abuse.
That's awesome. When you told me you were doing that, I was like, yes, that's
spot on.
So important. And he did a bunch of reading and research on it. He's going to cover a lot of stuff, which I think is going to help a lot of people. Matt?
I want to talk a little bit about how the approach to mental health with children and teenagers is sometimes different and sometimes overlooked and not even accounted by states.
Wow, that's awesome. And that's another one is, I think mental health care in general starts at a very young age. We need to be able to get a handle on it quickly and be able to not only, it's not always about diagnosis. I don't think you always have to put a label on something, although it helps with treatment and care, but I think it's important to acknowledge and recognize there's something there. And Nick, you're going to be kind of our closer, so to speak.
I'd like to do a little catch-all. I'd like to give some statistics to kind of back up the research out there, but I'd also like to talk about access and then just kind of pinpoint a few different disorders that are more prevalent than others.
That's super important, the access to it. And a lot of people don't know where they can go. They just know about a suicide hotline, and I'll call my counselor. But they don't know that there's a lot of access. There's a lot of resources out there that
BHR is always great.
Yeah, Nick's going to help us find a lot of those. So that's good. So I'm just going to read a little thing here. Historically, mental disorders have had three major explanations, namely supernatural, biological, and psychological. Obviously, supernatural would be religion or other forces that we don't understand. Biological is scientific. It's our bodies. It's our functioning systems. And psychological is mainly our mind and emotional. But that's, like we said, the encompassing all over categories. You have to get more specific, and that's where you have to break it down. For much of recorded history, deviant behavior has been considered supernatural and reflection of the battle between good and evil. When confronted with unexplainable irrational behavior and suffering and upheaval, people have been perceived as evil. So if we go back in time and we look at people with mental health disorders back before we knew what things were, and people were just called touched in the head, or something's wrong, or they were called retarded, or things like that. It was more of an evil or off-putting, so they basically locked people away for it, and we want to go past that. So, to be more specific, in fact, the Persian Empire from 900 to 600 BC, all physical and mental disorders were considered the work of the devil. So you see where everything started from. Physical causes of mental disorders have been sought in history. Hippocrates, or how do you say that? Is that correct?
Hippocrates.
Thank you.
That's the one.
Was important in this tradition as he identified syphilis as a disease and was therefore an early proponent of the idea that psychological disorders are biologically caused. This was a precursor to modern psychosocial treatment. Approaches to the causation of psychopathology with a focus on physiological, social, and cultural factors. Well-known philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, etc. wrote about the importance of fantasies, dreams, and thus anticipated, to some extent, later this was developed into psychoanalytic thought and cognitive science. They were also some of the first to advocate for humane and responsible care for individuals with psychological disturbances. Now, as we go along tonight, and the reason I did that little brief history is, from the beginning of recorded history, all the way back, biblical times and past, there's been trends and treatments and things. At one point in our history, throughout the world, the United States is young, but we are also one of the most developed countries in the world quickly, and we have been kind of the forefront and the what do you want to call it, the battering ram for breaking down stigmata on this stuff. There's a lot of countries where you're still just called retarded or you're crazy. There's no treatment. And there, if you go to some third world countries and prisons, there's a lot of mental health issues in those prisons, and they don't treat them because they don't identify.
Man, I hate to break it to you, but there's a lot of mental health issues in our prisons.
We're gonna get to that. We're gonna actually. I was
We
actually.
also have the most incarcerated individuals
per capita in the world.
So that brings to another, and I'm hoping that comes up eventually, but we have to, if we start breaking down the stigma of mental health issues, and what we mean by that is how people want to stand off from it and just want to call somebody a psycho, right? Like I did one episode, and the reason I did it is because he was the one that shot up a bunch of people, so I used the word psycho. But we don't want to just, and I think we just had that happen. Trump kind of said, well, he mentioned reinstitutionalizing people, and as Nick just shook his head, as anybody will tell you, that's a failed experiment that really, I think, set us back years on the mental health aspect. You throw people into a warehouse, basically, you lock them in there, and then you use all of these sometimes medieval type of treatments. I mean, for God's sake, they used to electroshock people's brains to get them. They used
Still
to
do that.
lobotomize people, where
Don't do
you're taking
that.
a section, taking a section
we
of
couldn't
brain
stop
out.
that.
Yeah, we
They
stopped
used to
that.
do it in this country. They still do it in some countries.
ECT is still a widely used and appropriate treatment for certain mental illness, to be honest with
So
you.
let's briefly, before we get into the specifics, the electric shock therapy. I'm sure it has more technical terminology than
ECT.
that. ECT, okay. What have you seen them use that for primarily?
I mean, I've had two patients when I was a floor nurse for many years ago. There were patients that received it from, we're talking about very specialized individuals that are providing this, and it was for specialized diagnoses. So, when you're seeing deep-seated psychosis due to one reason or another, and it's resistant, you can't treat it with traditional means, meaning counseling or medication or a combination of the two, then we start looking at other things that are potential treatment options, and that's one of them.
And is there some answer to that in the books, or with your knowledge of why do they use ECT? Why is that utilized still today? Because like you're saying, there are some applications for it.
Yeah.
Even though some of us in the everyday world would think you're shocking people's brains, but there is some applicable.
And we do need to take the time and get ourselves away from the traditional movie style electroshock therapy. We're not strapping somebody down to a bed with leather straps and putting electrodes up to them in the freaking Tesla coils. Where that's not what it is. Just to kind of show you a different way. About 3 months ago, there was a research article that was brought out that stated that the average American had a completely falsified view of what a code is. So
explain that.
So when a physician or a provider came up to you and was talking about, hey, your loved one is very ill, they are still a full code, meaning that if their heart stops, if they go into cardiac arrest, we're going to perform CPR and all this kind of stuff. So shows like Grey's Anatomy and ER and all this kind of thing, we get this picture that within an hour episode, this person's heart stops and then they're up sitting in a bed talking to you.
Right.
The research shows us that you have a 5% or less chance of returning to your current level of functioning post-code, which means there's a 95% chance that you're going to be a vegetable or there's going to be something wrong with you. You're going to have deficits. So our ability to consume media has changed our ability to disconnect ourselves from what that shows us versus what is a reality. And electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, is not the 1950s electrodes and electrocution, thing like that. It's a very controlled situation, and like I said, it's used in situations where traditional therapy is not. I've seen it used in severe depression, like I said, psychosis, things of that nature.
I see there's a lot of visual imagery connected from movies, from the electric chair where they kill people to the ECT. I've seen that connection, and it was made with me in my head. I think when you think about someone being electrocuted in the electric chair in a movie, you also think about electric shock therapy because you're using electricity to alter or to change something with a human being. So it's a good point.
I have a specific question on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Good Lord, sorry.
Nailed it.
It's all right. You got it, man.
Is this something you ever see in someone that has like major neurocognitive disorder? Does that ever work?
I'll be honest with you. I
Explain neurocognitive, please, because some people don't know what it is.
because I'm not a medical professional.
So you just know the word?
Yes.
Would you like to say what neurocognitive is?
We're talking about somebody that has severe neurological dysfunction to where they have the reasoning of, say, someone.
So like
a 12-year-old,
it's almost like
they're
a
50,
like a physical. It affects them physically.
It's a physical brain dysfunction that makes it so you don't process information and the way that you should, the way that the average person would. When you're talking about medicine in general, you're looking at the average human being and then deviations from there. So when you're talking about a deficit from a neurocognitive standpoint, you're talking about a physical issue.
We've kind of done a little bit of the history, and folks, I encourage you. I implore you to go and research this stuff yourself. Become educated, and if nothing else, this show will accomplish is the fact that there might be at least one person out there that actually wants to go and research this stuff themselves, to learn more about themselves. Maybe they're dealing with a loved one that's going through something, and they're like, okay, where do I go? What do I do? And it's a really dark place. Speaking as a personal experience, and knowing that I've been in relationships with people that have had to deal with mental problems with someone. and I'm talking about day-to-day stuff, but it's a really dark place for a loved one because you're
It's
being
hard to watch
affected
something that
mentally.
you can't help.
Right, you're being affected like PTSD. He's going to talk about it, and every one of these mental illness issues that we deal with, whether it's the everyday anxiety disorder, the ADHD, which is also a very prevalent disorder, those things affect everyone that knows the person because you are brought down with the person because you want to help and you want to be there for them. So that's what I implore you to do as if you want to really learn about this, if you really want to improve and break down stigma, it starts at everybody's home. It starts personally and with each of you. If you guys will go online and start doing real research, look for recognized and knowledgeable things online. Don't find just anything. And then talk to professionals.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to piggyback on that.
Yeah.
Stay away from Dr. Google, just real quick.
Yeah,
PSA for the night, stay away from Dr. Google. If you think something's wrong, if you have a loved one who thinks something's wrong, if you have a child who thinks something's wrong, or a friend, please seek help. We'll get more into the access later, but please seek help, find a professional. That is your best and absolutely most important step.
And then we'll go to Nick near at the end so you can give some references
Yes.
for us. So basically, some access to help that they can reach in the area, and then there's also national and international places where you can go. But we want to start getting into the individual disorders and illnesses.
Real quick before we get to the individual, interesting question was posed by Henry. How much of all this could be a learned behavior? I'm directing this towards you because you're dealing with it day in day out.
He said, how much can be a learned behavior?
Yes.
Meaning, if there's someone that you're learning from, you think that's what he means?
I forget the medical term for it, but it's where
Like not genetics, but actually taught.
right, where your brain actually kind of breaks and it develops this rather. I truly forget there's actually a terminology for
Well,
it.
Henry, here, let's do this. Henry, if you're watching, obviously, respond again to Zach and let us know exactly what you mean by learned behavior, because I think there's some levels to that, and we really want to answer the question. We've got Nick here, so it'll really help. So please respond to that, Henry, and tell us what you mean by learned behavior, whether it's something you're dealing with or it's something you want to know about. So let's go on with the individual stuff. What we want you guys to understand is we're just covering a tiny smidge of the mental health issue, but I think it's a lot of a good access to everyday stuff that's happening in the world with people that we know. I think that PTSD is a good place to start because you suffer from it yourself, and it's also such a widely misdiagnosed and
Misunderstood.
and there's misunderstood and stigma attached to PTSD, and it's almost like fibromyalgia when you talk about people don't understand fibromyalgia. I still don't understand fibromyalgia, and I've researched it, looked it up, but it is an actual thing. People are affected by it, and maybe it is some mental, maybe it's some emotional, but that's what we need to do is break it down and figure it out. So I want to hear about PTSD, and I think if you'd start with a little about yourself with it, if you
fully
don't
plan
mind,
on it, yeah.
so you can people understand that you are dealing with it from your personal perspective, and then you can open up from there, and then we'll go to each person. So PTSD, Zach Mazaid. I said it wrong again.
It's all right. It's all right. So it's PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and myself, I deal with this every day, and I've dealt with it for many a moon now.
Many a moon.
I was going to say it, but somebody else.
Many a
jumped in.
moon.
Maybe
yes.
a full moon, would you say?
It's a space station.
Blue moon, if you will. Yeah. But no, yes, thank you, Christy. That's the word I'm looking for. Psychosomatic.
There
That's
we
the
go.
word I was looking for.
That is-
And Morgan broke it down a little
not
bit,
to
too.
use the slippery slope argument,
Of
but
course,
that is
of-
Okay,
That is very
let's do
simple.
to the first thing.
Incredibly
He's going to read something that Morgan wrote, but
Please.
what is psychosomatic?
basically you believe in something so much that you have the symptoms of
It
that
doesn't mean
disorder.
it's fake. Okay, there's people that have psychosomatic issues. It doesn't mean it's fake. It just means that you've got to learn how to decompress that and unbox it. All right, what did Morgan say?
Said learn behaviors or behaviors a child or even an adult witnessed by others, such as family. My adolescents learn unhealthy coping skills by watching how their parents deal with anger.
Okay, so we'll get back to PTSD, which PTSD, but Morgan, thank you, Morgan. Morgan had a good to break down kind of the learned behavior with mental health, and that's a good point.
So do you think that
As children,
do you think that a child could watch their parents be super stressed and have anxiety and develop it from watching them?
So, I mean, there's something to be said about nature versus nurture.
Right.
I mean, that's what this argument is,
Yeah.
or what this discussion is. It's we also have to understand that perception is about 9/10 reality.
Right.
When you
And the law. Oh, that's
yeah,
possession. Sorry.
yeah. When you see something and it happens over and over and
joke.
over
I love
again,
you, serious.
I love
Dad
that.
jokes.
when these become normal behaviors, yes, that's absolutely a very serious issue, an incredibly serious issue.
I think that's super interesting, and what Morgan brought up in the learned behavior is if you are a child and you spend your entire childhood and teen, your adolescence, and you see a behavior from someone with an actual mental illness, can you develop a mental illness yourself? And what do you think?
Well, I mean,
Is it something, because mental health illness, if you're talking about schizophrenia or a diagnosis like that, because of the other levels of it, when you're talking about anxiety disorder or especially depression, can you, because I know depression is typically, if you're diagnosed with it, it's a biological thing with your serotonin, but what I'm asking about is, if I'm a child and I see my parents emotionally abusing each other, and my dad has anxiety disorders and my mom has OCD, obviously, am I going to be okay? And that's what I think. That's a good question. Is as a kid, learned behavior is just, if you're just,
well, our brains don't fully really form until we're 25-ish, is what the research shows us. So
Older if you're males, right?
Yeah, older if you're male. So if you're seeing this behavior over and over and over again, it becomes normalized. But also we have to look at it from a genetic standpoint as well. It's the same kind of correlation with something like alcoholism. Alcoholism is another one of those things that has a big stigma to it. It's one of the few disease processes that you can yell at somebody for, somebody once said.
Right.
It is a disease. Alcoholism, just like depression, just like anxiety and panic disorders and phobias and schizophrenia, these are all diseases. And there is at least a genetic component somewhere.
And I think the problem sometimes is that when we talk about alcoholism or drug abuse, these can be learned from parents, because you watch any show like Intervention, a lot of the kids that had parents that were addicts become addicts themselves, and it's learned behavior. So in that case, it is. If someone would ever break it down and show the physical and the physiological changes that happen in an alcoholic, like they show brain patterns, that's almost like you have to show court evidence sometimes, where this is like they have this in cases now with people that commit crimes, and psychologists and experts are trying to show parts of the brain that are being affected, especially in mass and serial killers, in mass shooters. They're doing that now. They're analyzing the brains. They did it with Ted Bundy's brain. They analyzed his brain and looked for, electronic patterns and to see where it is. And there are some actual differences.
And I think part of the difficulty in the entertainment aspect that you're referencing, and in the popular culture thing, is that there's still so much that we don't understand about the brain and how it works.
Right.
It is an emergent property. It is,
Right.
The sum of its parts do not explain what it actually is.
So
And that's a difficult
Henry
thing.
also answered his question. He said, is it possible for someone to learn from others, like Johnny gets all the attention, whether it's positive or negative, and they want the attention too, so they act out like Johnny does?
Well, I don't know that's possible that happens. I don't know if that's a mental illness or it's just a child acting out. But I guess we could find something that's wrong with it.
It's being very vague.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say
That
one
sounds
of
like a personal
The
question.
biggest dangers
It
of
is.
that
So
kind of
about a guy
behavior.
he knows.
Yeah.
Right.
A guy. Just asking for a friend.
Right.
All right, let's get back to Zach, because I really want to unbox his PTSD from a personal aspect, because we're going to get to know Zach really well here. Sure. And I do know personally, Zach, from talking to you, Zach has been through a lot in his life. When we say this, we're not saying this to make it sound big. Zach has been everywhere and seen a lot. So when he's going to talk about his personal experience, please listen, and I'll guarantee you there's going to be a bunch of you out there that's going to identify with some stuff he's talking about. So Zach, go ahead and take it.
So, a little bit about me. I grew up in the psych ward, figurative and literally. It was funny. Our shrinks and our therapist and our psychiatrist, if you will, actually called our house the psych ward. My brother is a schizophrenic. My mother had agoraphobia. My father is a manic depressive. My other brother is Well, he's just fucked. And then you have me. I do suffer from anxiety issues as well as post-traumatic stress disorder. All of these are clinically diagnosed. What caused my post-traumatic stress disorder, my PTSD, if you will, is my youth, the trauma I endured during that time. At age 3, I was actually ripped from my mother's arms and put into state custody. I was then, a child of the system, if you will. The very first foster home I went to ended up locking me up in a closet for the better part of a couple days, as well as all the physical assault, verbal assault, emotional abuse entailed. It was a very broken household, and to this day, I still suffer from that. And as with any person, not to make light of this situation, deals with it the best way they can. So myself, I'm a self-medicator. That's what I do. So growing up, there was a lot of times where my brother, he is a schizophrenic, and he'd be a lot like Johnny. And we'd see positive enforcement from one parent to another, and my brother would actually act a fool, if you will, because the attention wasn't his. Now, I don't know if that stemmed from his mental disorders or just because it is a kid. Who knows? But for me, I spent every day in state custody just blatantly getting my ass whooped. Didn't matter if it was a belt, a bat, the backhand. It all worked. And there would be times where, it takes such a toll on you, and you try to find a way out. I mean, myself personally, my kindergarten teacher had to contact authorities and whatnot because I tried to hang myself in kindergarten. I had enough. That's what it was. I don't think it makes me any less of a person. I think it just shows a person can only endure so much.
So let me ask you to specify just a little bit about how you feel. You have been diagnosed with PTSD.
Yeah.
So let's unbox that. How do you feel when you're affected by PTSD? Is there something that comes over you, or how do you feel?
So I actually plan on delving into that. I was just giving a little bit of a backstory.
Oh, okay. All right.
But myself, there's. I actually learned an interesting statistic here. A lot of trauma, it's a 50-50 split, but I found out, and this is from NAMI.
NAMI.
NAMI, sorry.
National Association of Mental,
Yes, sir.
I just joined them, actually.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. 8% of men and 20% of women actually carry on the duration of their trauma. So it goes from just trauma, I went and got help, and now it's there.
8% of men and 20% of women.
Yeah.
According to NAMI.
According to NAMI.
Oh, they're pretty good because they track these vaccinations. Yeah,
they're pretty reasonable there. Now there is. Sorry, just making sure what page it's on. There it is. I also found out that apparently there's 4 segments of here. There's the intrusive, avoidance, negative cognitive, and alterations of lifestyle. Me personally, whenever it's bad for me. It's not necessarily a negative cognitive. There is the alterations, there's the avoidance, and there's most definitely the intrusion. Now,
hey, Zach, when you're not to correct, but when you're talking about the specifics, the words,
yes,
how kind of like some of the
break
words,
it down a little bit.
break it down because I will be honest with you. Part of the stigma is
the lack of
the lack of understanding, and what I would love for you to do, because you live with it, is if you break down just a little bit more, describe what some of these technical words are, because there's somebody out there right now that's probably feeling the way you feel, and a breakdown of one of those words might be like, oh, that's me. So if you would, when you get a little more in depth, just kind of give a really brief description of what it is.
Not a problem. So intrusion is, I actually bulleted it out, so I was hoping I had the same mindset when I was writing this up today. And intrusion is going to be the recurrence of memories, the flashbacks, and like nightmares. It's all things that intrude on you that you don't want, but it's there, and there's nothing you can do. So there's people who suffer from PTSD where when they go to bed at night, they relive what happened to them, and it's down to a physical aspect. When you wake up and you can feel the bat that cracked over your back that morning, and it's rough, and it causes a lot of other problems.
It's draining. It's emotionally draining. I mean,
it is. Yeah, no, most definitely.
Hey, can I ask real quick?
Please.
Have you noticed people with PTSD or those symptoms? Have you ever noticed progression to other things?
Absolutely.
So PTSD is a precursor to many other things,
Yes.
correct?
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
depression and anxiety and
Not only
that's inclusive,
Yeah, not
though.
only just mental health issues,
But physical
We're
too,
talking
right?
about physical issues. We're talking about social issues. We're talking about, you name it. It can manifest in so many different ways.
Okay.
Some of these different things, not only manifesting in violence, but in obviously things like suicide. Things.
Okay.
It manifests in many different ways.
And that's something that before it's over, I'll talk about my personal experience with where I depths of myself. So go ahead and kind of get into keep going.
Sure. Avoidance would be to avoid, to separate yourself. Persistence, avoidance of locales, areas where that trauma happened. Physical location, mental. Literally avoid what you're feeling. Run from it.
That's true.
Negative cognitive would be like the lapse of memory during that time. Negative emotional effects, misattribute it, blame. So it took me years to realize this shit wasn't my fault, but yet I'm still the same guy who will sit here and apologize for it. Habits are hard to learn.
That is so. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
That is such a good point. I think, and Nick has seen this clinically, but I know personally, and now you're talking about it. The apology aspect of it is, I want everybody to understand, because this is why we're doing this. Is
close enough.
This show in particular.
Did he say chrysanthemum?
No, that's somebody has.
Now we did it.
Yeah, it's in there. But I think is coming to grips with the affliction or the disease, and then knowing it's not your fault. You don't have to apologize. And I think that's emotionally what happens a lot of times, is we feel like, because we're taught to internalize and take everything on ourselves. And I think with PTSD specifically, I think that we want to apologize and I know put our hands up and go, I don't know what's going on, but I'm really sorry that you're going through this. Well, you can feel that way, but don't let that apology keep you away from getting better.
Of course.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. And then alterations of behavior. You can become easily irritable. I know I definitely still do. Reckless and self-destructive. This is pretty much my
That's good.
my dealing. Reckless and self-destructive. I'm more alert. I'm aware of my surroundings at any given time. It's almost to an extent of a paranoia. But it's because I learned at my formative development years that people were inherently bad, and you have to protect yourself. No one else will. You're easily startled. I know I've had roommates before who will wake me up, and I will wake up swinging. I've knocked my roommates out because of this.
And that's part of your PTSD.
Yeah, it very much is. Insomnia is another thing that comes, because if you don't sleep, you don't have to relive it.
If I can jump in for
Please,
just a second
please.
and interject,
Thank you, Bailey.
I can tell, and I don't even know if you can notice it, but by the way your mannerisms and even your voice have changed, that it's difficult for you to talk about this.
Very much so. Yeah.
You're reliving it in itself just by talking about it, and that's something that's hard to do.
It's
and I
rough.
think another reason why people don't want to seek help, because they're going to have to talk about it, and that scares the hell out of them. You know what I mean?
But see, Zach's a prime example of a person that is almost come full circle. You still deal with it, but you have found ways, and I think that's part of the issue with life is we're kind of left on our own to deal with stuff. And I think if we educate each other and we start teaming up together, and I know if Matt's got an issue or Cody's got an issue, if they feel like they want to open up and lay themselves out to me, I'm willing to listen and help them find what they need. But when you're by yourself, if you're by yourself and you're feeling some of this, reach out, man. Message us right now, and Zach will write your, and Zach can call, and you guys can have a conversation, because it's just about finding an ally.
And something else that I want to bring up too, that I think Nick will pony back on at the end of this, is it's great to have that outlet, but your friends are not mental health professionals. Sometimes you need
That's a very bad advice
for people who don't know what they're talking about.
I know, and that's true, but I do know that if we have a starting point, sometimes we are so lost and so broken that we, first of all, don't want to burden people with our problems, don't want to talk about it like you talked about, but at the same time we need a starting point. And I know that for myself, what helped me is I had a guy that was just like me but older, and he had been through it, and he was like, here's what I did. And it gave me a launching pad. And that's what we're doing right now, is hopefully we're giving someone a launching pad to start dealing with some of their
issues. It gives you hope, just because maybe that's not necessarily what he did would help you as well, but it lets you know that there is a way to deal with it some way.
Exactly right. Yep. So Zach, would you like to?
Yeah, no, and a lot of times, and not to, I'm not going in too deep on this one because Cody definitely is going to cover this, but we find ourselves self-medicating with drugs and alcohol and being impulsive. And as I'm writing down my information, I had a thought to myself that, and I wrote it down here, and I definitely want to read it. Every day is a war zone in your mind. The constant contrast of good and evil. It's hard to separate them. The moment you wake up in the morning and all you think is like, fuck, man, this shit again, and like myself, I always say I paint the jester on. I tell jokes to see others laugh, because I know what it is to live in a world without laughter, and all we do is cope day in and day out, but we strive for the well-being, the strive for greatness that pushes us along, the help we live, the help we leave, the presence we leave behind that defines our engagement. There's always going to be the days where we look in the mirror and just don't see someone worth it. But we have to get a better mirror. We have to take a closer look and realize we are worth it. We're from the class of we made it, and we withstood the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune just to make it where we are now.
Zach is an author, and Zach knows how to put words on paper and deliver them. That was super. That was amazing.
Thank you.
I want to jump on. We're going to go to Cody next because of what you just referenced, and I think it's a natural transition to it, a segue to it. But I want to say one quick thing is something that you said made me think is mental health disorders and illnesses, especially in the self-treatment stage and trying to get better on your own. One thing that I would tell you is you can't big picture things. You got to individualize your days and your moments. Each moment, you got to live for each moment, and what that means is don't overthink. And that's one of the worst things that I did with my disorders and my illness, was I overthought my problems and overthought things that are going on. And like you said, there's a war zone in our head, and everything's. I used to say this the reason I write is I was able to unpack stuff out of my head, and I could cleanse, and I could get things in order. And I think a lot of times when it comes to mental health issues, and I think a lot of people out there will agree, when you're dealing with the anxieties and stresses of life, and if you do have an illness, it's compounded and made worse, but it's hard to unbox and level things off. Everything just slams together, and once it slams together, we're lost, and then we start having the lives that we don't want to lead. So like he said, you are worth it, you're a champion, be your own champion, and a lot of times with mental illness, you can't count on anybody else. So take a step, help yourself out, and if you know someone, there's ways that you can get them resources without making them uncomfortable, without making it a big deal. Because when you really care about somebody, you can look them in the face and say, look, whatever you need, I'm here for you. I'm going to help you get what you, and it takes a while to break that down sometimes. So really quick notice, you are watching Sessions streamed live from Shakers. Every Thursday from 8 to 10 p.m. we are here at this table. I thought Sessions was a good name, but we should have called it, Black Table Talk.
Shaking Tables.
Shaking Tables.
Shaker Tables.
Shaker Tables, that's right. But we're here every Thursday, 8 to 10. My normal guest, my everyday guest here, Zach Mazzei, Cody Essick, Matt Lawler, and our special guest tonight is Nick Irvin. If you'll notice, we'll bring in a new guest different times, and it's in that kind of that chair over there. Tonight was important to bring Nick in because he's a professional in the field with psychology and mental health issues. So we're going to go on now to our next. Zach covered PTSD. I mean, I learned a couple things about it.
Absolutely.
I appreciate how you made it. You related it to everyday life.
I appreciate how hard that was to talk about, and you killed it, man.
And that's the thing is, man, is this is therapy for us, but it's also you probably helped somebody out, man, and that's an amazing thing. If we
I
can
just want to say one more thing
Yeah,
before
no.
we transition.
right ahead.
Anybody watching, message me. I have open messages. If you need someone to talk to, I don't care the time. I promise you I'm up. We will find you help. I can talk to you, whatever it is.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, and if Zach feels like with the experience that he has with mental health, he will tell you, hey, there's these access to these things, and that's where Nick's going to help us out. I want you to get a pen and paper ready for when Nick comes up, because he's going to actually give you some specifics and stats. All right, Cody, you are going to be talking about, again, what are you talking about?
That's the correlation between mental illness and substance abuse.
Okay, and I think this is super important. I want everyone to pay close attention because
I'm excited about this because I see a lot of that in my job.
The kind of the way I formulated this, it was more open to discussion. Like I have some facts and stuff to come through, but a lot of it I just wanted to have a chance to talk
So
about.
let's unbox it. Cody's going to talk about the substance abuse issue that comes off of mental health problems, diagnosed and not diagnosed.
Absolutely.
And so, Cody, we're interesting. Take it away.
Absolutely. So whenever you are diagnosed with a mental illness as well as substance abuse, it's called a dual diagnosis or a co-occurring disorder.
Okay.
So it happens at the same time. Usually, there's a very good chance that if you have a substance abuse problem, you do have some sort of mental disorder, and vice versa. Being the biggest reason, I think, between the correlation would be self-medicating. If you have an issue, an anxiety disorder, something like that, you usually have symptoms of it. Anxiety, you sweat, you know what I mean, you get super panicky, nervous, things like that.
What
So
can I
something
do
that
to
calms
make
you
this
down
go
a
away?
little bit will help you. People will go turn to Xanax. People turn to alcohol. It kind of calms your system. If you have ADHD or are hyperactive, you want something to calm you down.
Which now you're diagnosed with
I was,
ADHD.
yes,
Okay.
and I can definitely tell you there is a correlation in me between substance abuse. I mean, it's nothing extreme. I was never like, I'm not into meth or anything like that, but I smoked weed to help correlate.
Yeah.
It helps me. Like beyond anything that I've ever tried in my entire life, smoking weed helped me more than anything else.
Okay.
So it really is something that people turn to try to relieve themselves of some of these symptoms.
How did and this is a good. How did it help you?
It calms me down. It helps me to focus on something. My thoughts are at any given time just to the wind.
So it slowed it down.
Slows it down,
allows
allows me
you
to focus on
okay,
something.
all right.
It's beyond anything else. I tried Ritalin, I tried Adderall. To me, they put me at an uncomfortable level of focus to the point where, and also not only that, they didn't just help with the focus. If it was just the focus, it wouldn't be as bad. But along with the focus it gives you, it also gives you just this insane amount of energy that you don't really have any outlet for, and that ate me up inside. I couldn't deal with it.
Did any of your research uncover anything about why it is that prescription drug use is so prevalently given to mental health disorders? Like, did anything cover that?
Well, a lot of the prescription drug use, a lot of it is to help the disease, but I think a lot of it does more bad than good because it gives people the idea that I can take this and it'll help me in this way. So they're willing to try other things to try to do the same thing.
So, Nick, just real quick on what he just said, in your line of work, do you see this where there's an over prescriptions given, basically where they overprescribe medications, and then sometimes in that, do you see individuals thinking, well, I'll do more of that, and then they become addicted and they need something else to do something else?
I mean, we've been seeing an increase in prescriptions for the last 2-3 decades when related to mental health. Part of it is because we know more about it.
Do you think?
But
is it necessary? Do you think?
I mean, I am a firm proponent in pharmacological interventions for disease processes like this, but they have to be used appropriately. And the problem is we have people that either don't seek help at all or seek the wrong kind of help, and that can get you in trouble even more so than taking these medications.
Is part of medicating someone giving them resources and access to the next step?
I mean, that's what it's supposed to be, yes.
Okay.
I'll get into it a little more later, but, the end-all, be-all of treatment is not throwing a medication at it. That is a component, a potential component, but mental health, the way you treat it is what we would consider multidisciplinary. It means that you are using the resources necessary to treat this, and not there's more than one resource.
Right, and not necessarily good resources.
It's important to realize when you enter some sort of treatment that this is not a short-term thing. This, for most people, is a lifelong thing, and to disappear into a prescription bottle is not the only treatment option.
Which is huge, because when he's talking about the lifelong thing. So if you start getting on a medication that helps something, once you get off of it, it can absolutely, you go through withdrawals. It changes the way you feel. Like, you'll almost sometimes, whenever people stop, they're worse off than they were when they started. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just really dangerous, and that's one of the dangers of self-medicating too, is because once you start self-medicating, if you go too far down, then the symptoms of whatever you're using, whatever substance you're using to help, will often make the mental disorder worse, especially with the withdrawals and the physical toll that it has on your body.
I just thought of something. You said something the other night, last week actually, when I asked you to come on the show, about practicing medicine, and I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, we call it practicing medicine because we're not perfect at it.
Right.
Right. So into what Cody's talking about using medication and self-treatment, since doctors aren't really good at it, we can't be good at it ourselves, because we're trying to find something that makes us feel better. That's the key, right? It's a if I can get this to feel better, I can ease this thought, like you said, with what's the proper?
You can say
dope,
anything.
whatever.
I wouldn't say pot or dope. Those are
Like,
old school ways to say it.
I'm 50, dude. I just turned 50.
Weed. People call it weed these
Okay,
days,
so
for the most part.
you self-treat with weed sometimes, and it helps you kind of focus. And when you said practice, it really, this is one of the reasons why I loved having you on the show, because what you guys need to understand is especially with the mind and the connection with the body, but the mind, there's so much, like Matt said, unknown about the mind, that if you're treating someone, and God forbid if you're treating yourself, but if you are, keep this in mind. No one knows everything about it. We're still figuring out so much about the brain and how everything works. So be very careful in your self-treatment, your self-diagnosis of stuff, and get professional help. And then also recognize, if you can, stay on top of what's being done with your body and your mind, and realize I'm not saying you're a guinea pig, but in effect, you're kind of being experimented on with different, like a new medication's made and developed, and then the doctors are given that and said, here, give this to your people and let's see what kind of side effects. And I think what you have to realize is that it's part of how things happen.
Right. There is a huge difference between a fully educated, I don't know everything, and a minutely educated, I don't know everything.
For sure.
Well, and we also have to realize, everybody's bodies work a little different. A drug that works well for me for a disorder may not be the drug of choice for you or you.
Is that because of physiological and chemical balance?
Well, yeah. I mean, the body is an incredibly complex machine, and these hormones and these neurotransmitters and all these things that are built into our bodies, they work
differently for each person.
Like I said, when we're talking about treatment, when we're talking about medicine and diagnosis, we're talking about the average person, and then deviations from there. Well, this is the thing. There is no average person.
Well, so that brings to mind, and we'll get right back to Cody, but back in the 90s, we were called Prozac Nation. There was a book out called Prozac Nation.
I have that book in my shelf at the house.
So my concern with that is when there is a drug that seems to be a miracle drug for something, it always turns out to be so now Prozac is hardly ever died. It's not given out much.
I mean, it has fallen out of favor. But what you're saying is the same lines of any other disease process. Think about it. Mid 1990s, oxycodone is brought to the public, and this was supposed to be the end all be all in pain management. If you had a knee ache, they were going to give you oxycodone. You're going to be able to go out there and play with your kid and push them on the swing set. Well, now we have an opioid epidemic. Right. So people need to realize, again, I'm going back to what I said earlier, this is a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary situation where numerous different strategies have to be used to control some of these more serious mental illnesses. There's not going to be a magic drug that's going to fix anyone. That is something that's never going to exist, or at least not going to exist as we know it. We also need to realize that all drugs, and I'm talking about actual drugs, I'm not talking about like vitamins or the little capsules that you can get at like the freaking vitamin store in the mall or anything like that. All drugs, pharmaceutical things that you have to get from a provider that have to prescribe you, all of them have side effects. Every single drug you take has a side effect. Some of them have intended side effects. If I give you a drug to lower your blood pressure and your blood pressure lowers, that's an intended side effect. So with these drugs that are used to help us deal with mental illness, not control, not cure mental illness, to deal with mental illness, they're going to have side effects as well.
Medicine in general, whether it's for physical ailment, blood pressure, or if it's mental, psychosomatic, or whatever, would you say that it's allowing the body to work properly or trying to help the body work properly? Because I know when it comes to like, you get a Z-Pack for a flu.
Well, all these are additives. All of these are additives.
All right.
If you want, disclaimer, this is my personal opinion, not a medical
No,
opinion.
no, no. And we should say that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is Sessions, but we want to let you know, none of us are doctors. We're not prescribing any use of medication. Do not use anything we're saying. This is basically 5 people sitting around talking about the state of mental health illness the way we see it. This is an opinion show, and based on some stats we looked up. But please, if we say something about something that worked for us, don't run out and get it or try it. Don't go out and smoke marijuana just because Cody said it worked for him.
Right.
What we're saying is
if something's a fact, we'll tell you it's a fact
right.
most of the time.
There are some things that worked for us that may not work for you, but that's where professionals come into it.
So again, not my medical opinion. This is my personal opinion. We are an incredibly lazy society.
No.
An incredibly lazy society.
What?
And this is not to dissuade anyone with a mental illness from seeking help. But if you come into a physician's office or a provider's office and let's say you weigh 350 pounds and you have awful blood pressure, I'm going to tell you, well, you need to lose at minimum probably about 150 pounds. You also need to eat better. You don't need to get McDonald's every 3 days or sometimes every day.
I barely eat McDonald's.
You need a good variety of fruit, meats, and vegetables, and you need to be more active. That's how we should be treating that.
Right.
Now,
Real and honest.
he's going to come back in a month and his blood pressure's still going to be sky high and he's still going to weigh 350 pounds. And my recourse is to give him medication to help control his blood pressure. Now, we're kind of equating apples to oranges here because mental illness is definitely a little bit different.
Right.
But
so you give people, basically what you're saying is you give people these options, these things they can do without medication to improve themselves. They don't do it, and then they come back to the medication for help, right?
welcome to medicine
Right.
in 2019.
Right.
It's hard, and I don't want to do it.
right.
That's what you see. I've been there.
So the point with the lazy society is not a knock against anybody in general, but it is true. Everything is a matter of convenience for us now. And if we can find a drug or something to help us that's easy, we take advantage of it, and doctors know this. And unfortunately, there are some lazy doctors out there too that, treating mental deficiencies, mental illness, mental problem. It's hard. It's
exceptionally difficult.
It's probably the hardest line of human treatment is the mental emotional aspect.
Everybody's different. It's hard to pinpoint one thing when everybody's so different.
And there's so many. You think there's so many blood pressure meds, psychosomatic and mental illness meds are. I mean, there's hundreds and thousands. There's bunches. So let's get back to Cody. Let him go on because I want to make sure we get everybody in before we close. But you are watching Session Stream live from Shakers every night, every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. You'll join us down here at the table, and we're going to talk about different issues. Typically, it's kind of lighthearted, and we talk about topics of the day-to-day stuff. Today we're talking about mental health, and I think it's a super important category. And I'm learning a lot about some stuff. So we're continuing now with Cody and his connection between mental health and
Drug use.
substance abuse. There we go. Thank you. So Cody, go ahead.
There's only a couple more things I wanted to touch on. One of them being that we talked about how your mental illness sometimes is the starter for you to go find a substance to help help it with, but sometimes it goes the other way. Sometimes you don't have mental illness and you started doing drugs, and you can develop one from it, especially in the sense of like psychoactive drugs like mushrooms, acid. You can do those one time and develop a mental disorder that you didn't have beforehand, you know what I mean? And so that's where it gets kind of dangerous too. That's where kind of the correlation goes, where it's not necessarily that all substance abusers have mental disorders, but a lot of the times people with mental disorders do have substance abuse. So it's just one thing that you got to be careful of. If you're abusing a substance, there's a good chance that with between the withdrawals, between what it can do to you, you could end up with a mental disorder, and you really have to be careful with that kind of stuff. And then another cool thing I found, not cool necessarily, but something interesting I found was that there's actually a correlation between genetically between mental disorders and substance abuse. They found that I'll just read it. It's a lot easier. There's a growing body of evidence to suggest that psychiatric disorders and substance use disorders might share common etiology. It's been postulated that common genetic factors might be shared across psychiatric disorders and substance use disorders. For example, a common genetic susceptibility may explain dopamine dysregulation, substance abuse, and mental illness. Basically, if you're genetically you have this trait where you don't release the dopamine you need, then you're more likely to go to that drug that probably gave you that had some effect on your genetics in the first place to give you that feeling.
Right.
For instance, if you're in the womb and your mother's using prescription painkillers, you're in the womb, you kind of feel normal at that point. That comes to be your normal. So when you get out, you come out with withdrawals, with an addiction already. So if later in life you go to do that substance, and all of a sudden you feel right, it feels exactly how you were always meant to feel. It's something that you had from when you were young that makes you feel like that. So it's kind of something you just have to be careful with.
And that brings up a thing when we talk about learned behavior, but there's precursors when you're in the womb or with all of the medicines that get prescribed. It's really hard to figure out what happens to a baby in the womb or being affected chemically and physically by something the mother does, and we try to be very careful. See, Christy,
I was about to say she just posted a great question.
It's a good question.
Are doctors encouraged or given
answer,
kickbacks by the drug companies to just prescribe a pill for everything instead of alternative measures that don't include meds?
That is absolutely illegal.
It is illegal, but she brings up a good point.
That's why I had
we'll
to
just
ask.
touch on it really quick.
It used to be done that way.
Well, but here's the thing. I will say that's a good question. Chrissy's basically saying or asking, do doctors get kickbacks from drug companies to prescribe their meds? So let's talk about this briefly, Christy. It's a good point. When you're talking about especially psychosomatic and mental stuff, because there's so little known, it's experimental. So, but I do know. I actually looked this up, and I actually talked to a doctor online, a guy that I actually know. He's not from here, but he told me in medical school that they are visited by drug companies in medical school, and it is under the guise, and I don't want to make this sound all subterfuge, but it's under the guise of educating the doctors about the product's efficacy and what it can do for patients, the applications for it. But yes, Christy, I don't think there's kickbacks per se, because that is super illegal. You hear about doctors all the time. Do they do it? Yes.
Even here in Cape Girardeau.
Even here in Cape Girardeau, we're not going to say any names, but we've heard of them. But do I think that there's encouragement for doctors to prescribe certain meds because of certain things? Of course. And I think I agree with you. The doctors that I go to now that are offering alternative meds, meaning nutritional health, like you said, helping you lose weight if you have high blood pressure, a doctor that gives you alternatives to take this pill, that's kind of becoming a thing now. People are starting to wake up and be more aware of it. So, Christy, you are exactly right. Do I think that there's payouts? I think that there are probably doctors that do get paid out, but it is highly illegal, so it's not something that's supposed to be done. But you need to, you can look for things like that. If your doctor puts you on a med and then won't let you get off of it, if he tries to keep you on a med, there may be something there. I don't know, but that's something that you'll have to look into. But it's no way to tell it, because no doctor's going to stand up and go, unless they're forced to, and stand up and go, yeah, I did this. So
I think that's a super important point. Is when you're feeling not right, the first question you should ask your professional is, what can I do different? What can I do? Not what can you give me? What can I change to make my life better?
And in all fairness,
because those are things you can control, independent of medication.
In all fairness, this doctor did tell me that that in medical school now that they are teaching some alternative meds. So
Real quick, I do have to use the restroom. I know we're live.
Hey, you
I
take
gotta.
it.
I
You're
got.
fine.
I'm not gonna take the mic with me.
Usually we get breaks.
Thank you.
This is that serious
This is going straight
episode.
through. So Cody, do you have any
That was
more?
pretty much all I wanted to cover
Okay.
for the most part.
So what Cody started with is the correlation between substance abuse and mental health issues. And I think that's very important to know because, like Cody said, when we are feeling bad, whether it's physical, mental, emotionally, we're looking for something to help us feel better.
And it's kind of funny. It kind of goes along with the lazy thing too. Instead of going to seek professional help, you can just fix it yourself, and it's not necessarily you're not a professional, so you should be prescribing yourself these things.
That's exactly right, and I think the point is since it's so hard for doctors, since it is practicing, it's so hard for doctors to get things right. Please understand that with our limited knowledge of ourselves and how our minds and bodies work, please don't take the path of treating yourself. Now, you need to be in charge of your treatment, meaning if something doesn't feel right or you think that you're being prescribed the wrong thing or there are side effects, pay attention to that stuff, but you need to be in charge of your treatment, meaning don't get prescribed something just because it's the thing to get, but educate yourself, look into alternative medicine. You can go to your practitioner, your family practitioner, your doctor, and you can say, hey, I read about this, I learned about this, what do you think? And a good doctor will say, well, there's alternatives, we can look into that, and they'll say, well, let's try this, and if this doesn't work, and then doctors will tell you, I encourage any kind of self-education that you can do, good doctors, where you can look into treatments for yourself. Since if we're talking about opiates and things like those are prescribed. When we're talking about alternative medicine, we're talking about better eating habits, better diets, sleep. And there is, and I'm going to talk on this briefly before we're done. But there is a correlation between bad sleep patterns and mental health.
Oh yeah.
So see, and touching on Cody's for myself.
Don't touch on Cody.
I will touch all over Cody.
That's all right. He has permission.
So touch on Cody's topic here. About self-medicating the drugs to do that. My thing, the one that I found for me was ketamine. I would send myself into a K-hole.
Oh my God. Ketamine?
Yeah.
The pet tranquilizer.
Yeah, a horse tranquilizer.
Let's be specific.
Let's be specific here. But I am the size of a small Shetland
literally
pony.
my first college experience.
I am a pony.
Look at that mane.
Right?
Literally, my first college experience was seeing a floor mate OD on ketamine the first
Oh my
time.
God.
Ketamine
The
was
first time
all
you
there.
used ketamine.
No, I don't recommend it, but
Oh my
for me,
God.
ketamine was my drug of choice because you left yourself.
Oh my
My mom would have lost her mind if she'd known that story, wouldn't she?
Obviously, I'm much better now.
Are you though?
Well, I'm not on ketamine.
That's huge.
Show me what you
One
got.
last thing I wanted to say along the same lines, since we were talking about it, if you do have a substance abuse problem and you do want help, there are so many places you can go to help it. Don't think that just because you're on something that's illegal and you're worried that what people will think about you, anything like that, don't be afraid of that. They understand. They've dealt with us 100 times, and more than that. They can help you. They can get you out of that. Anybody can.
I have a number of defendants right now that my primary goal is to get them treatment because they need and deserve it.
Exactly.
See, the
Just
thing-
don't be scared to get help.
The first step is taking the first step.
Right, on either, and that's on both sides, not just for the substance abuse, but also for the mental illness.
Yeah, and
go get help. Don't feel like it's a sign of weakness.
This game got out of
People care about you, and there's so much that can be done. So,
Well, and I think that's why this society, especially I'm speaking of the United States, I think our government, our society wants to throw people in prison with mental health issues because we don't know how to treat some of these, especially some of the violent offenders. And there are people that are just, I'm sorry, and it's just my opinion, that are beyond redemption, that are beyond help. There just are. You can talk to some of them. There are some people that are on death row that they don't want to be better. They want to be who they are. They're happy with who they are.
look at that. We got a substance abuse counselor in the chat right now. If you guys need help, hit up Morgan McCain. She's got you.
So that's the point is if there's somebody out there that needs help, we have people responding that we know here from Shakers that are in the field, and that's what Nick's here for. That can help, so that's what we're here for. This is not a telethon or anything, but we want to offer help because if there's one person person out there that contacts somebody and we're able to help them, then that's what this.
This
Could
was
you
all
imagine
worth it.
how awesome it would be to hear later that somebody watched the show and ended up getting help?
it's
And dude,
the
that
only
would-
reason we're doing it.
Jesus, give me a goddamn.
It's the only reason we're doing it. The only reason we do it is so we can help, have a conversation and open it up. So, you are watching Sessions stream live from Shakers every Thursday, 8 to 10 p.m. We talk, it's a topical show, interactive conversation. We're getting very interactive. We've got a lot of people responding online, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
Henry actually
We haven't
asked a
dropped
really
below
good
like
question.
17, 18 views this entire time. It's crazy.
It's good.
Henry ended up asking, have you guys touched on psych wards being housing facilities?
Well, we did talk about them being kind of warehousing.
Yeah.
It's they're the institutionalized in what Trump has kind of been talking about, but the institutionalization, what's the word? Institutions
Institutionalization
are not
is the word
a
you're
favorite
looking for.
You said
anymore.
Henry was his name.
Henry, yeah.
Is he asking as a means of having a place to live, or is he talking
No.
about this is where
No,
we stick people?
we're just gonna stick people.
Because I mean, you got to understand, there's some of the latest statistics are that upwards of 26 to 27% of the homeless population
Yes.
suffer from
Yes.
mental illness,
Yeah.
and 46 to 47% of
Right.
that suffer from a serious mental illness like schizophrenia.
I can believe that.
In Henry's experience, what he's saying here is there was a lot of times where, with stuff he had to deal with, where it was an easy fix. Go here, we'll worry about you. And
Yeah, we stick our wounded and our misunderstood away, and that's what we've done in this country for a long time. So Henry's right. I think at some point in the history of our country, institutions, and there's all the stories and our visuals, institutions were the go-to, where if we didn't understand somebody and they had a serious mental issue and they didn't commit a crime, but it was just something we didn't understand, we put them in somewhere. And then in ancient times, they just sent somebody off and shunned them. And
In not so ancient times.
yeah,
That's a relatively recent thing.
The point is we need to come to an understanding on the fact that there are people out there that have problems and issues that we need to be able to deal with, and if we don't understand them, we don't embrace it, and we start talking about it and getting it out there. We all know somebody, and the key is being able for people to sit around and come to an accord. So
One more thing. Henry said, but the cost is so high for help, and it's no pay, no help. And that is not necessarily true. I can
No.
tell you places in Cape Girardeau right now that have
That are free.
community counseling center. Cross Trails has a sliding scale, and they have counselors there that you can talk to, and they'll
So
work with what
They
you
don't
make.
receive much money, and
also-
they are
it's-
they
but
are
they are
in every-
qualified. I
And
don't
also
care
follow
myself,
that up
so-
there with as a place for help, but the psych wards only keep the child, kept
3
there
days
for 3
and then
days.
sent
It's a 72-hour hold, and then sent home. With no help. It's you have a parent like Henry here.
We have 96 hour and 21 day holds in this state now.
Really?
Yes.
yeah.
It's also,
you would have loved that.
talking about the high costs and everything like that, it's important for us to remember that there are, and these are 2017, 2018 statistics, there are 5.3 million Americans out there that are uninsured with a mental illness.
Yes.
This is not just uninsured, this is with a diagnosed mental illness without the ability to go see someone in their area. Now, when you expand the insurance coverage for these folks or do whatever you have to do to make that, you're looking at pretty large, significant reductions. Missouri actually had one of the largest reductions in people being seen with acute mental illness at let me read it, 6.3%. That's one of the largest, and that's still minuscule.
So the problem is a big one, and that's why we're doing this. And we'll probably do another show like this because there's so much more to unpack. And like somebody mentioned about the topics, how each one of these topics could be an entire show.
Oh, yeah.
So we got 2 hours, and so I want to get on to the next person. Nick, you're going to be my closer, of course, to kind of surmise everything, and then I'm going to finish with a little testimony if anybody wants to jump in after that, but we can. But Matt, what is your topic that you're talking about with regard to this?
Well, but another life ago, before I decided to go to law school, I worked for several years for the Department of Mental Health in a facility that dealt with residential care for children and teenagers who had what I would call a complex mental illness state. They had more than one DSM diagnosis. And these were individuals that were not appropriate for acute care where you're in a hospital facility, but at the same time we're not ready to go home and just be a regular member of society. And I believe at the time it was the only facility of its time in the state of Missouri. And due to budgetary issues and other things that were going on, the state decided, I think the final play came down to Governor Nixon when he was in office, was just to shut that out. They decided, you know what, we're gonna close this, and that a private institution opened up the facility. But my understanding is that it does not provide services on the level that it did when the Department of Mental Health was in charge of it. And these are kids that, by any stretch of the imagination, were not ready to go home. They're not ready for your average or superhero parent to take care of. You know, they had a school there. They had their own cottage where they were broken down by age and or behavioral issues, and they lived there.
So let me ask you this, and maybe you've run into this in your line of work. If you were talking to a parent with your experience and your knowledge, what do you tell a parent that has an adolescent or a teen that you feel like honestly they have a condition or an illness that is either undiagnosed or misdiagnosed? What would you tell them to do? I mean, because there's a parent out there right now with a teenager that is hell on wheels, and it may not be the teenager's fault. And then we always in this society we like to go personal responsibility. Well, yeah, we want to make them personal responsible, but if there is an affliction, something they're dealing with that requires some treatment, we want to be able to give them access. So what would you tell a parent?
It's incredibly difficult now in this state because, if they don't meet the criteria for hospitalization, then the state by and large says, we can provide these services, but they're probably not enough because they're still living at home with these parents who are ill-equipped to deal with it.
Let me ask you what you would tell someone, not what the state says. I want to know what Matt Lawler would tell a friend that has an adolescent child that is having problems. What would you say to them?
Keep trying. Tell everyone that is involved in this field.
Okay.
I have this child that is doing these things that I feel like they need your help. Please help them.
See something.
Don't ever give up.
Can I touch on that too,
Sure.
just a little bit?
Well, you like touching everybody.
I like touching everyone.
You're a touchy-feely guy.
So I see more now. There's a lot more help for adolescents, and I know your topic's adolescents. That's why I'm focusing on this. There's a lot more help for adolescents, for children, than there was to say, let's say in the late '90s, in the early 2000s. There.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, Henry keeps asking all these questions. Henry's my biological father. So he's
Hi, Henry.
He's coming from the day there where we did nothing but ask, and there was nothing but 72-hour holds, and after said hold, it did nothing but cause damage to an already broke house. And I don't mean by financial, I mean by mentally broke house.
Right.
So
Thank you.
I would love to see the help that we have, now or trying to have now.
Thank you, Bailey.
That would have been around during that time. It's just not. It's a rough stick, man.
Well,
That's it. It's super rough.
and I'm sure Nick will be able to touch on this some more before you're finished.
Now you're touching on stuff.
No. Yeah. See, thanks a lot, Zach.
Chrysanthemum.
You manipulated me. That's twice. But I think that the key, and what I want everybody to understand is the sooner we can diagnose or get help, the sooner. And this isn't whether it's physical, whether it's cancer,
Right.
or a mental illness. So if you are a parent of an adolescent or even an 8-year-old child, it doesn't matter. There's been proof, and this is, if you go online and look this up, mental illness can be diagnosed in children as young as 3 years old.
I was diagnosed with ADHD at 3 years old.
And the point to that is whether it's ADHD, whether it's mental illness or a physical ailment, the parents, and sometimes it's so hard because we're so overwhelmed and we feel like there's no access, there's no help, and it's upsetting and it's scary and you feel guilty like you did something wrong. at the earliest point in a child's life, there are ways without making it into an embarrassing thing that you can go somewhere and start the beginning process of analyzing. And there are case studies of parents that said, hey, at this age, I went and took my child and we talked and we worked through this stuff, and the child ended up being able to cope and deal. And I think that if we realize that, if we do that and we make sure it starts in the home, it really does.
See something, say something.
Yeah.
Works for bombs, works for mental illness.
It's so important that we remove these stigmata, as you've been saying, for that very reason, because someone that is dealing with a mental health issue as a child or a teen that is unaddressed is going to certainly grow up into someone who we have to help as an adult.
And then they're going to self-medicate.
More likely to
They're
go
gonna-
into self-medicate, yeah.
And then that's where they turn to their friends, because they have other friends that feel like them. This is with social media. You've got one kid online that feels a certain way and has something they don't feel right about, and then they identify with somebody else, and that's where mass shootings come in, I believe. I think these people, these mass shooters, obviously needed treatment, things to help them, but had they find a cause or they find something to feel a part of, and it makes them feel better. Like, okay, I'm not.
It's something that you by and large see from these people, that they're seeking out other individuals that think the same way, and that is not simply a characteristic of these people that decide to go out and kill other
that's
people.
where-
That is something that everyone experiences.
Well, this is, if we're going to dip our toes into the shooting aspect versus mental health, I want to be very upfront. I want to be very clear.
Sure.
The evidence shows that you are four times more likely to be the recipient of violence with a mental illness than you are to commit an act of violence.
I would agree with that.
I want us to be. I want to be transparent about that.
So you're more of a victim if you have a mental illness?
You are four times
likely.
more likely to be the recipient of violence with a mental illness.
So what about the people that do mass shootings?
I mean, I can't give you a correlation between mental illness and mass shootings. What I can tell you is every single place on this planet has mental illness.
Right. Every society.
And again, I'm sure that I am further left than I was 20 years ago. But mass shootings are
Brother, this isn't a left and right issue.
by and large an Americanized issue. It truly is. The facts, the data show it.
Well, most of them happen. Yes. Yeah.
Now, granted, that's because there's more guns than people in this country. That's just a fact. That's a numbers game. But mental illness, I don't want us to, again, a term that I used earlier, I don't want us to throw a blanket on this and say depression or anxiety or schizophrenia caused this shooting. These are most likely very troubled individuals.
Yes.
So do you mean, so when you say trouble, and I really want to know, this is, I think, what a lot of people want to understand is, when we say troubled individuals, you're saying that it's hard to make a correlation between mental, because we just don't know, but when you say troubled, what do you mean?
Well, and that's the thing. These people probably do have something diagnosable. They really do. I can't take that off the table. But we start saying this is strictly a mental health issue.
It starts blaming the mental illness instead of blaming the person for
one,
doing it.
that increases the stigma within the mental illness, but two, there's no clear-cut path to figuring out how to fix that issue. Because if you go the route of institutionalization, that's a problem.
That right there is the trouble with this issue.
There's no this isn't a case where you can just say, hey, these people are psycho and we're going to treat them that way, and we need to make sure that we overhaul our mental health because of this. We need to overhaul our mental health.
It doesn't undo the tragedy.
Because we need to overhaul it because it's broken. Because, hell, here in the Midwest, we're probably about 10 to 15 years behind the coast when it comes to dealing with mental health. If I lived in LA right now, you better damn well believe I'd have at least a counselor, because there's not a stigma related to it. Here, trying to find a counselor, good luck. You're going to wait 6 months, and then somebody in public's probably going to make fun of you for it.
But don't you think, and this brings it up, don't you think, you said on the West Coast, like in LA or wherever, don't you think sometimes that overuses it and makes an excuse for someone to not live their life
For
to
a
the
counselor?
fullest?
No, I don't. I think that is one of the biggest things that's underutilized. No one understands how important it is to dump your brain problems on somebody who's not a family or friend until you actually do it.
I personally would far rather overuse it than underuse it.
No, I mean, as a society, we want to find a balance, obviously. But my question is we have started to see a rationalization of psychotic behavior in this country. I'm sorry, and you're in the field.
That's a whole other problem.
Well, no, it's not. We're talking about in LA, like he said, if he was in LA, he would have at least a counselor because there's a lot less stigma attached to mental health issues
And accessibility for that
And
matter.
accessibility. So my thing is we in this country are starting to, I'm not going to say normalize psychotic behavior where people shoot up something or somebody does something psychotic that we commonly think of as psychotic, but we've become more accepting of it because it's happening.
Well, yeah, I know. I think we have
prevalent.
normalized it. I mean, there were 2 serious mass shootings in, what, a day? Apart from each other?
48 hours minimum.
Yeah. And here we are less than a month later, and I haven't seen a single news story about it this week.
No, because it becomes political,
Well,
and
absolutely,
people are
that's part
tired
of
of
it.
it.
That's
People are
part of it.
tired of
But
that.
we went from this is a problem that we need to do something about to, well, now we need to overhaul the mental health care in this country.
Or they went to the
And now
gun,
it's
or they
gone.
went to the gun
You know?
control. We took the emphasis off of the individual and the treatment, and we went to gun control, and we went
violence
to
and video games.
violence and video games.
Yeah.
It's
And here's another fun
it's a
fact.
knee jerk,
Every
but it's a
country
natural
has
knee
video
jerk.
games,
Right.
too.
yeah. So
And what how many wars happened before we had video games? Do you think violence just spawned
This
from
is what I will
video
say.
games? Like,
It is 2019, and I'm okay with us normalizing mental health. I'm okay with us saying, you know what? It's okay for you to go talk to somebody who's a professional to deal with whatever issue it is that you have right now. And we should be accepting
That would be a beautiful thing.
It would be an absolutely amazing and beautiful thing.
I think we're getting closer, though. Honestly, I think that everybody talking about their mental health and the social media. I hate to use that, but I mean, people talking about their anxieties, their depression, things like that on mental health has kind of normalized it a little bit. And I think it is a little bit.
It's
easier.
one thing where we are truly stronger together.
It
Well,
is.
but here's the thing, and we have to be careful in society as a group. We have to be careful about normalization of things. Not that we don't want to talk about mental health, because that's what we're doing. We want to make sure treatment's available, and it's something that we talk about all the time. But we got to be careful because as this country has fallen into this political landscape and everything becomes political and becomes a tool for someone, the mental health treatment and the normalization of mental health could turn into a tool of, well, little Johnny's not responsible because little Johnny has this.
It's far simpler than that. It is, I feel this way, and other people go, I feel this way too. And you talk together and get that together, and then someone says, well, I feel this way, and someone says, whoa, you're way past the line, weirdo, and then you've lost it.
It could also get dangerous on the other side if everybody starts to normalize it and say, if everybody starts to say they have anxiety, then people will stop doing anything about it and just kind of accept this as what we are.
Well, over diagnosis of things where they just like overprescribing certain medicine like Zoloft or Prozac, we don't want to overdiagnose, or just like you said, we don't want to put someone into a psychosomatic category of some mental health disorder, because then we're almost trivializing a legitimate mental health issue.
Let me give you some statistics to back up your children, adolescents thing. 1 in 5 children between the ages of 13
That's
and 18.
20% if you're playing at home.
Yeah. Between the ages of 13 and 18 have or will have
He's a
mental
maverick,
illness
not
or
an
even a
athlete.
serious mental illness. 50% of all mental illnesses start by age 14. Okay? 75 by the age of 24.
Percentage.
Yes,
50 or
percentage.
75.
So we're
of all mental illness.
We're
Okay?
talking about 3/4 of all mental illness beginning before our brain is fully developed.
Let me tell you why I'm okay with the normalization of all of this. Can somebody hazard a guess of what the average delay is in starting treatment?
I'd say probably
10 years.
There you go. 8 to 10 years is the average. So you've got a kid,
Starting treatment
age 14,
from an early diagnosis.
from
the onset of symptoms?
and intervention. From the onset of symptoms to intervention is 8 to 10 years.
Yep.
So you've got a 14-year-old kid, And when they reach the age of 23 by average, that's when they start treating their mental illness. Okay? We have now become a society that has, as its third leading cause of death in the adolescent population, suicide.
Jesus.
Third, between the ages of 10 and 24. It is now the third
It's a
leading cause of
staggering
death.
fact.
It is now the 10th leading cause of death from the beginning of life to the end of it.
Wow.
From beginning of adolescence all the way to geriatrics. The 10th.
That's insane.
Okay? Out of all the diagnoses out there, heart failure, kidney failure, respiratory issues, cancers, suicide is number 10 now.
So let me ask you, since you said that, let me ask you this then. Since we know it's 14 and it takes 8 to 10 years, in that 8 to 10 year time frame, is it basically, and this is, I'm just asking for your professional opinion, but is that their solution, the individual solution, do you think? They're tired of feeling
suicide.
damaged?
I mean, 90% of suicides in this group of people have an underlying mental illness.
Okay.
That's a statistic that we have.
Morgan said suicide is now second in adolescence. It just updated.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank you, Morgan. I appreciate
That's
it.
insane, dude.
So it's getting worse, is what
Right.
we're saying.
Why? Why is it?
Well,
Like, what do you
why-
think?
Lack of access is probably a thing.
Lack of access is definitely a thing. Part of it is this thing here. I've got my little iPad in front of me. Okay. There are numerous research studies out there that show our access to entertainment, and I'm not breaking it down any, but social media, computers, your iPhone until 3 o'clock in the morning in front of your face. There's research out there that shows that it is changing our brain chemistry.
So,
Yeah.
so if that's mind-boggling. But think about this for a second on what you're saying with the social media and the iPad and all of this. I think that there's a correlation between having so much information at your fingertips and still not finding an answer. I know in my mind,
The internet has knowledge. The internet has information.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
to weed
It
through all
doesn't.
the other
Yeah, weeding through crap to get to fact is really difficult.
Right, yeah.
You just described the American media, man.
Right.
Well, and kids, 14-year-old kid is not going to know exactly what they need to look for,
Right.
and that's where guidance.
Or what is actual based on fact.
I don't know that the
It's
average
made up.
parent understands that.
And that's
Well,
actually what I was going to
human
say. I
knowledge is
think a lot of it boils down to the parents. I mean, you have some of these parents out there who, I mean, they grew up in the day, oh, you're jittery, here's a belt, versus, there's
God.
I mean, you're not wrong.
my
You're not
child
wrong.
locks themselves in the room, something's wrong,
30
go
years.
outside, here, have some sunshine. I mean, it's the lack of
Well, I
knowledge,
mean,
it's the lack of informed.
that's a super important thing. We have become a society that isn't as active anymore. We've become a society that doesn't go out as much anymore. That's it. I mean, this is a multifactorial issue that people don't want to really get down to the nitty gritty because it's not an easy answer.
Exactly.
So Roger, and I don't use last names very often.
The one below that's a really good point.
But Roger brought up the fact it took him 30 years from one of the most tragedies in his life, the worst tragedies in his life, to seek help. He's still coping with it. It took me to the point of suicide attempt before I realized something was wrong and settled help. So the point of that is because there's so much to understand about this, and it starts so young. 30 years, Roger. God bless you, man. And I feel where you're at. It took him 30 years and a suicide attempt to start to really get to an answer because it's so misunderstood. And he felt and he knew there was something wrong. He just didn't know how to make it better. And that's a terrible, dark place to be in. And that's
Absolutely.
Before we're done, I'm going to when I close out, I'm going to testify a little
Another
bit.
good point below that.
And then Morgan, one of the issues with adolescents is they see all these perfect people, in quotes, perfect, and they want to live that, but there is no such thing as perfect lives. And I think that goes with your iPad and your internet there's so many Snapchat and Instagram, and you've got all these pretty people making videos and trying to be a star, and then everyday people don't get to, it's not how it is. And when people don't have the chops to do it, or they just can't get where they want to get, or they don't get what they want out of it, they look for other answers. So go ahead, Nick, I'm sorry.
No, you're not wrong, and I do want to state that these statistics that I'm spouting out and yelling out into the microphone and into the camera, these are all readily available statistics. You can get them on the National Institute of Mental Health, which is a part of the National Institute of Health. You can also go on the National Association for Mental Illness. They have aggregated an amazing amount of information for you to scroll through, and then there's other programs that we'll get into here in a little bit. But I think it's important for us to remember that we're talking about a set of syndromes, a set of disease processes that affect nearly 47 million Americans.
47.
I have a quick question for you before we
I bet
wrap
it's
things
higher
up
than
and stuff,
that.
just so we can get it in real quick. From your perspective, you're a professional at this. What is like the first, like the easy, like, you know what I mean? Like, what's an entry level thing that somebody can do to start seeking mental health? Like, if ground zero,
Well,
where
first-
could somebody go if they
first
need some
you
help?
you have to know what the warning signs are.
Yes.
Because if you don't know what the warning signs are, they're probably already occurring.
Right.
Okay? Something as simple as seeing that someone's feeling sad or withdrawn for a larger period of time, for greater than even 2 weeks, as little as 2 weeks. This kind of stuff can set in. If you're seeing somebody with severe mood swings, if you're seeing someone that's trying to harm themselves, these are all telltale things that are saying there's something wrong.
Awesome information. That's awesome. I meant more like, say I'm the one suffering from mental illness. What ground zero could I do to start seeking help for someone?
Ground zero is you need to talk to whomever is your healthcare professional. Okay? So the way that you do not need like a prescription or something to see a counselor or anything like that, but the way that healthcare is really truly set up is the gatekeeper is your primary physician or your primary provider.
And they'll kind of lead you
And
to
then
where you need to
they
go.
should be able to lead you to where you need to go on this the next steps. Okay.
And if they can't, get a new PCP.
It is important for everyone to know that you have rights as a patient, you have rights as an individual seeking treatment. Those rights include the right to open, honest information. Those also include the right to accept or refuse any and all treatment. So I want to lay that out there too. But really, the first thing is identifying those warning signs, but two, taking it to a professional. Because, if it's a kid, talk to their pediatrician. If it's you yourself or a friend, they need to talk to their primary care provider.
What if they don't have a doctor?
Then you need to get one. I know access is terrible, but there are plenty of organizations out there. There is a free clinic here in Cape Girardeau, Missouri that you can go to. There are places like Cross Trails that accept
Sliding scales.
Medicare, Medicaid. If you don't have those, they will work with you.
They'll literally base your payments off of your
Well, wait,
income.
let me
on a
ask you-
sliding
Triple
scale.
C also does sliding scale.
What about you're talking about? What about an individual, an adolescent, and this is say it's in a very, very poor household, and so their only medical treatment they get is at a health clinic, a county health clinic. I'm sorry, and no offense to anybody that works there because they try very hard. Most people at a health clinic are not equipped to handle emotional or mental disturbances.
No, and that's where places like Community Counseling Center, that's the Family
Okay.
Counseling Center, they're on the corner of Sprigg and Independence.
Yes, sir.
Something as simple as talking to your school counselor. That's
a good one. I didn't think
Every
about that. That's a
single
good one.
school in the state of Missouri has to have a counselor.
And they're trained to
And
deal
they are
with-
trained
Okay.
specifically to deal with adolescents
That's huge.
and
I'm glad I brought
kids
that up.
in these situations.
Community counseling, family counseling, New Vision, all of these are places that are equipped to deal with that. Go talk to them. They will help you.
This is another great one. I literally carry their card in my wallet. BHR, it's not just Missouri, it is across the board. You can call them anytime, 24/7. They will set you up with a doctor. They will set you up with mental health. They will.
Do you have a phone number?
Yeah, actually, their 800 number is 800-811-4760.
Say that again, please.
Yeah, we want to type that in.
Yeah, please. It's 800-811-4760. And I mean, they will come to you. It's discreet. If you don't want to meet at home, that's fine. Give them a destination. They will meet you there.
Thanks a lot for all your help on everything, man. I think we could really have helped a lot of people if they had a chance to see it. So.
Yeah.
I want to give a few more statistics
Yeah, for
just
sure.
real quick.
Yeah, yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd like to stop because I can't sit anymore.
No, let me get out of your way.
Sorry. I'm having a little bit of a medical issue this week, so I am uncomfortable sitting for long periods, and we'll leave it at that. For the for the crowd.
We'll do that next show.
Uncomfortable medical situation.
We'll wait for you to not be here for a show, and then we'll talk about it.
So I think it's important for us to, dig just a tiny bit deeper and see what the impact of this is. Out of that nearly 47 million Americans, 10.5 million of those have co-occurring mental illnesses. That means they have more than one mental illness going on, whether that is depression and anxiety, whether
10
that
million.
is, So I mean, it's a huge issue. Depression is the #1 disability worldwide. Worldwide, we're not even talking about America right now. We're talking about depression being the #1 reason people are disabled worldwide. It is costing you, me, and the American taxpayers almost $200 billion a year.
With a B.
With a B, that's the big B, in lost earnings every year with mental illness costs in this country. Because this is the problem. Mental illness leads to physical illness when not treated properly.
Which kind of goes along with the high suicide rate, because a higher rate of depression is going to lead to a higher rate of suicide.
They used to say that you can judge you can judge a society by its prisons or how many people are in prison. I think we also need to say you can judge a society about how they treat their mental health problems.
You said 10 million?
10.5 million people have
10.5
more than
million.
one.
All right,
And that's
so-
out of that 47 million.
I just want to break
Yeah.
that down into small scale. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
All that means is you're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to realize that 60% of those 47 million individuals in America did not receive treatment last year. 60%. So you're talking about over 30, or close to 30 million people that did not receive, care. Out of that, it's even worse if you break it down by ethnicity. If you were a Hispanic, you can cut that by 2/3. If you were an African American in the United States last year, you can cut that into 2/3 as well.
Well, and that brings up a great case when you're talking about minorities. There is a further and more advanced stigma in the in the black community about mental health issues. And I'm not talking in a turn. This is from someone that I talked to. It's not okay in the black community to be gay. It's just not accepted, and it's not and it's hard for a lot of communities. But it's also not okay. It's sometimes in the black community or the Hispanic community to identify yourself and have a mental or an emotional issue, because there's so much strength, and people think, well, just be strong, just be strong.
You can't be
man
weak.
up. And the problem is our society is not addressing that, and so I
Do you
think
have any
that's a great
statistics
point.
as far as men and women and how they differ in this mental illnesses?
Men are much less likely. I don't have an actual percentage for you. Men are much less likely to seek treatment than women. Like I said, I don't have a exact statistic for it, but that is.
Do you have any more that you want to?
Yeah, one thing, just so you know, Missouri is the 36th ranked state in the union in mental health treatment, just so you know. So we are
36.
behind the curve. To put that into perspective, Iowa is the 8th, Illinois is the 18th, but hey, Arkansas is the 41st, so we've got that going for us.
So did you say Iowa's the 8th?
Yeah.
The land of fucking corn beat us.
Yes, they did.
Okay.
And quite badly.
What that's saying is basically in Missouri we have an issue.
Yes.
We need to get some things done.
And I'm going to direct this at whomever's watching real quick. You may be asking yourself, well, what the hell do I do now? 1, seek help. Absolutely 1,000% seek help. If you know someone, get them help. It can be as simple as talking to, like I said, their provider. It can be taking them to a counselor. It can take them to the school counselor. If you're in college, there are counselors readily available on every single college campus. If you are somebody who doesn't like people or doesn't like getting out, we even have apps that you can use, and they either will use your insurance or they cost about half of what going to a traditional therapy session is. Some of these apps are Simple Practice, BetterHelp, Luminosity is one of them. There's tons out there. Look into them if you are interested. It's better to have them than to not. But if you see someone with warning signs, please say something. That's literally the least you can do. And if you are suffering right now, know that once again you are not alone. But two, the most important thing you can do is be active with it. Be active in your treatment. Seek counseling. Take your medications like they're scheduled. Have somebody to keep you accountable to make sure you're taking your medications. I cannot stress that enough.
I want to give a couple shout-outs real quick. Morgan said, you guys' session was amazing. Thank you again for breaking the stigma and the silence. And Roger said, love Shakers, and you guys are awesome for doing sessions, especially this episode. Thanks a lot, guys. That means a lot.
Yeah, and,
Actually, it wouldn't matter.
and I think, Nick, thank you so much. Nick Irvin, everyone. Nick decided to come in and agreed to come in because of his professional knowledge and experience in the field. We talked all about mental illness and the issues from society to the education of it and the awareness and then the activity, what you need to do to make it better. And I think in closing out tonight, I want to thank my guests, Zach Mazade, Cody Essick, Matt Lawler, and the very knowledgeable Nick Irvin. The main point that we want you all to get out of this is we're just every average day people that wanted to give a solution to and to get you on a path to getting better. And if one person out there finds some solace in this and is able to find themselves on the path to getting better, then that made this whole show worth it. And that's exactly why I did this show, is to change things. So for you that are watching out there and that have watched us every week, I thank you so much. Sessions is a super important show. It's everyday people giving their voice. We're giving voice to people that normally don't get to say anything, but there's a lot of knowledge in the community. And as a group of people, as society, instead of dividing ourselves, we need to reignite and rejoin and get behind an idea and a passion. And we'll stop all of this silliness in the world. It'll no longer be politics and division. It'll be unity and getting together at a table and having a conversation and finding solutions amongst ourselves. So for Eric Harper and my guest, you have been watching Sessions every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. streamed right here from Shakers. We'll have a musical guest next week, and we'll have some of our guests back. And thank you for joining us. And you are the beginning of the change. Be that change.
Thanks,
Good night.
guys.